he is the author of Playmakers, and he kicks off this family of network shows on Peacock every single day with PFT Live. The creator of Pro Football Talk himself, Mike Florio, here on the show. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing great. I'm floored by the Ray Liotta news. I wasn't aware of that. So
yeah.
Gut Punch for me as well. Goodfellas, one of my all-time favorite movies. And just a damn shame. 67 years old, a damn shame.
Yeah, man. I'm sad to be the one to bring that news to you, but that just happened was discovered a few minutes ago. All right, let's do our best to live in the world of the toy department in a way. I was just talking about Lamar Jackson not being at OTAs, voluntary organized team activities, which is the maneuver of the either veteran pushing 40 quarterback, right, who has that prerogative, or the quarterback who doesn't have a deal on the table, and he doesn't have a deal on the table from all reports because he's not willing to accept it. He doesn't either think he's worthy or it's just not his time for it. What gives? I can't figure it out.
I can't
Lamar.
either, Rich, and I can't remember a situation like this. It probably is unprecedented when you consider the money that gets paid to the best quarterbacks in the NFL, how the market is changing, and the ritual, the dance, the way that it works. You put your 3 years in. You win an MVP award. You're in line for a big contract. Well, he didn't want one last year, didn't want to engage the team. This year he doesn't want to engage the team either. And owner Steve Bisciotti said a couple of months ago that Lamar is so obsessed with winning a Super Bowl, I think deep down he doesn't think he's worthy. I think he wants that in order to say, now I deserve to be on top. And that's consistent with what he's told the team. He doesn't want to do anything until after the season. He wants to have the best season he possibly can, and then they'll take care of the contract. That's fine if that's accurate, but it doesn't mesh with the idea of staying away from the OTAs, because now is when the climb begins. Now is when the foundation for a special season is laid. And if he's not upset with the team because they've yet to give him his contract, if he's not trying to make a statement or protect himself from any type of a fluke injury while he waits for an imminent contract, sort of like Kyler Murray is in Arizona, it just doesn't make any sense. And it's the latest thing involving Lamar Jackson that doesn't make sense. There are so many conflicting thoughts and emotions. He's acting like a guy who doesn't want to be there, but he insists he wants to be there. He was mad at the team, it seemed, for trading Hollywood Brown, but Hollywood Brown said he knew I wanted out. So there's just a lot of inconsistency, and my concern is, and I would give him this advice if he was my son, nephew, cousin, friend, brother, client, whoever, I would say, look, get the best deal you can now. You play a brand of football that puts you at risk for injury. You had the ankle injury that caused you to miss several games last year. You've got 4 years in. At some point, you're going to lose that ability to run the way you do. Get your money now before something happens that keeps you from ever getting it.
Well, the thing that I would counsel him, and I said it at the top of, we're just about 10 minutes ago on this program, is not, to get the bag because, your style of play is potentially harmful to your health, although that is, wise to point out, Mike. It's that this sort of question mark or difficulty to predict or with no precedence to kind of base your belief on could grow tiresome for a franchise. Despite how popular you may be and how terrific you are on the field, you're running the risk of it not being worth it. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know. I don't think we're close to that. But over time, that might be it, Mike.
Rich, I think you're onto something, and I believe at some point the Ravens will become exasperated with the situation, and they will make alternative plans. If they can't get Lamar Jackson, despite all of their best efforts, to take their money, to give them certainty, to create cap space so they can put a team around him. That's one of the reasons why you do the long-term deal. Short-term, cap relief, so other great players can be brought to the team or properly rewarded so they don't look elsewhere. At some point, the Ravens will throw their hands in the air and say, time to move on to plan B. And I look at Tyler Huntley, and dollar for what they could sign him to a long-term contract for, dollar for dollar, he would be every bit as good of a value, if not better, than Lamar Jackson. At some point, they need to start thinking of it that way. Life without Lamar Jackson, because they can either wait for him to put his 5 years in plus 2 franchise tags, plus he goes straight to the open market, or they can get through this season, they can tag him after the season and trade him to one of the teams out there, and we see it every year now. There's teams who are trolling for veteran quarterbacks because they know that somewhere, somehow, you shake the tree hard enough, you're going to have one fall out of the sky, whether it's Russell Wilson or whoever else it may be. And I think that we have to, until Lamar Jackson engages the Ravens, we have to put him on the radar screen of guys who could change teams after this season, whether he wants to or whether the Ravens just get to the point where they say, enough is enough, we need to move on.
Mike Florio here on the Rich Eisen Show at Pro Football Talk on Twitter, and obviously Playmakers, where all books can be acquired, right here on the program on Peacock, which he kicks off on NBC Sports on Peacock every day with PFT Live. So lots happening in Las Vegas, Nevada. Let's take the off-the-field stuff first with Jon Gruden and his lawsuit against the NFL. Explain what happened yesterday and the significance of it, if you don't mind, Counselor.
And this is a tightrope that's very delicate for anyone who comments on this business for a living to walk. I don't defend the emails that Jon Gruden sent. And you could argue very easily he got what he deserved. But his lawsuit is about his rights. And even the people who commit the most heinous activities still have rights. You don't just throw people's rights under the bus because they did something that you can point at and say, that guy shouldn't have done that. And what Gruden claims the NFL and or Roger Goodell did was carve off the emails that he sent to Bruce Allen in 2011 when Allen was working for the Washington Commanders and Gruden was working for ESPN with heinous, reprehensible content, that the league and or Goodell took those, handed them to the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal in 2 separate waves, trying to get Mark Davis in a position where he recognized it was untenable to continue to employ Jon Gruden, even if Davis, knowing about these emails and privately deciding to go forward with Gruden because they were sent years before Gruden even worked for the Raiders. If he wanted to do that, he didn't have the ability to do that. Once it's out in the open, it has to change. He had to go. So the argument is they interfered, the league did, and Goodell, with his relationship with the Las Vegas Raiders and forced him out by releasing those emails. So what happened yesterday was the league tried to get the case thrown out. Judge said, motion denied. The league also tried to get the case pushed into arbitration, which I routinely call the NFL's secret rigged kangaroo court, because it is. Motion denied. Motion denied from the bench. Judge bangs the gavel at the hearing. That doesn't happen very often. That's spiking the football in the face of the party who loses. Usually the judge takes it under advisement. As I said this morning, even Judge Wapner took 5 minutes before he'd come back with a ruling. When you issue the ruling from the bench, that means that the argument that was made by the party that lost was weak. Now they're going to appeal, like they did with the St. Louis litigation. They kept it tied up for 5 years on appeals all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. The NFL desperately wants to get all of these cases into secret rigged kangaroo court, in part to keep the rest of us from knowing what comes out and what may make people look bad or look like liars or whatever the case may be. So they'll fight it. It's going to be several years, I would assume, before we even get to the meat of the case. But if it stays in court, Rich, we all are going to find out who ordered the code red on Jon Gruden. If it goes into arbitration, the chances of finding out publicly become much smaller.
So stay tuned, and this is a long game, is what you're saying.
Long game. Like it was literally 5 years, not an exaggeration. It was 5 years before the St. Louis relocation lawsuit had gotten through the threshold question of whether or not St. Louis would have to take the case to arbitration.
So, but discovery would, if reached, reveal who leaked the emails on Jon Gruden to the New York Times?
There'll be all sorts of stuff. Rich.
Like what?
Now,
what would it look like?
Well, it'll be documents. It'll be text messages. It's only limited by the creativity and resourcefulness of his lawyers. You can ask for all sorts of things in an effort to find out who sent those emails to the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. And look, the Times and the Wall Street Journal, they aren't a subject of proper discovery because they're going to protect their sources. But the sources aren't protected once you get into litigation. as to who sent what to whom, who breached whatever confidentiality the NFL attached to these documents. They still refuse to publicly release the 650,000 documents. They treat these things like top secret government files, but, a few here and a few there ended up in the hands of reporters. So, yeah, we'll find out one way or the other. And there are people who think Dan Snyder is the one who did it. Now, I'm not saying he did it, but there's a small universe of people who had access to those documents, and obviously they were on Commander's server. The Commanders had access to them, so he would be a suspect as well. And in a weird sort of way, the NFL would benefit from saying, we didn't do it, he did it. And we'll see, but it won't come to that until we get past this question of whether or not the case goes forward in court or heads to arbitration.
And how about that in terms of timing, Mike Florio, that on the same day, Jon Gruden receives a very positive ruling from the bench in his case against the NFL that the Raiders try out Colin Kaepernick as well. Which in its own right, in its own world, just on itself, would be a seismic event because it's a team that actually set it up, right? And he set it up with them in a full-on workout. And what's the genesis of this and the origin of it and where it may go?
Well, it's amazing. 5+ years of Colin Kaepernick being available and never having a workout with a team. When you consider how many players get workouts on a regular basis during the season, on Tuesdays, dozens, hundreds of players sometimes on a given Tuesday, depending upon how many teams bring guys in for workouts, get workouts. And Kaepernick couldn't get one, and he finally gets one. And Mark Davis had some comments to NBC Sports Bay Area a month ago where it was the first time we've had an owner speak favorably about Colin Kaepernick. And when I saw what Davis had to say, it's like, well, your backups are Nick Mullins and Garrett Gilbert, or maybe it's Gilbert Garrett. I always get it mixed. There's so many. I think that we need to do a study on whether or not guys with interchangeable first names and last names become mediocre NFL quarterbacks, because I really do think there's something to that. But
is that the Chase Daniel rule? Is that what you're saying?
Or the Davis Mills rule, or Mills Davis? I can never remember.
Gilbert Grape. You got that too.
But anyway, Gilbert or Garrett or both are gone now.
Wow.
And you look at the depth chart, and it's like, well, yeah, he could make the depth chart better. And if nothing else, if they don't sign him, what this does, it's the toe in the water. It's the moment where he gets the workout and the world doesn't stop spinning. The fan base doesn't abandon the Raiders. The season tickets aren't instantly canceled. That's what so many teams have been afraid of. If we even associate ourselves with Colin Kaepernick, we are going to piss off 30% of our fan base. Once we get past that, that's when a team could say, well, we bring this guy in. Maybe he's good enough to bring to OTAs or training camp. We see how he does. We see how he learns. We see what kind of presence he has. We see if he can earn a spot on the depth chart. I'm told there are a couple of other teams that were already interested in him before this Raiders workout. Now, time will tell whether or not those two teams do anything about it, but this Raiders workout goes a long way toward finally turning the page. After 5 years, we've finally crossed that boundary, and he's gotten a workout, and the Raiders are still standing today, and I think that may help other teams become willing to finally bring the guy in and see what he can do.
Well, I hope so, man. I'll be honest, Mike, because we don't have it's not 2017 anymore. We don't have a sitting president calling football players sons of bitches anymore. We don't have somebody in the White House in the position putting a quarterback at the forefront of a culture war anymore. And I think you pointed it out as well. What do you think a 7 Kaepernick jersey in silver and black would go for on NFLshop.com?
Yeah, and I know they'd be going for a hell of a lot more on eBay because you wouldn't be able to buy them. They'd be sold out.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to buy them on the secondary market.
And the idea that this was Mark Davis putting a thumb in the eye of the NFL, I think there are many in 345 Park Avenue for the NFL that would welcome Colin Kaepernick on an NFL team in 2022. Big time.
That's a great point, Rich. This isn't defiance of the league office. This is defiance of the voices in your fan base that will huff and puff and maybe, just maybe, blow part of your house down for associating with Kaepernick. Back during his collusion case against the NFL, which under the CBA ended up in a grievance process, and there wasn't much. It was through arbitration. Not much came out publicly because it wasn't in court. But one of the things that was discovered there was that the NFL did some sort of research, polling, focus group, whatever, and the percentage of folks on one end of the spectrum, anti-Kaepernick, was equal to the percentage on the other end. but the NFL chose to defer to the anti-Kaepernick crowd because I believe the NFL feared the business damage those folks could do. So those folks are still out there. That's why teams have decided it's not worth it, because it's not like we're bringing in Tom Brady. It's not like we're bringing in a top 5 talent. We're bringing in a guy who at best is going to be third or second string, at least for now. It's not worth the damage we do to the business interests to add this guy when there's so many other guys out there that can play. I'm not saying that's right, but I understand why it's happened. And I've said this for weeks, if not months, ever since Kaepernick's tried to come back in. There is no owner that has the moral or financial courage to do the right thing. Mark Davis does. Now we'll see if anyone else does.
Mike Florio here on the Rich Eisen Show. In the couple minutes I have left, and I appreciate the call here to the show, I guess the next 4 to 6 weeks is going to be, OTA and mandatory OTAs and workouts, and we'll see about Kyler Murray showing up and things like that. And those will be some interesting flashpoints over the next 6 weeks before training camps open. But really the open question is what's going on with Deshaun Watson and how that affects Baker Mayfield's trade status and what's going on with Jimmy Garoppolo. It sure looked like Trey Lance is the starter based on the conversations from their OTAs that happened in the last couple of days. What's your read on that whole situation, certainly in the light of Deshaun Watson's appearance or lack of appearance or his accused appearances on HBO on Tuesday night?
Two important points, Rich, on Deshaun Watson. One, there is a 3-step process that now applies under the personal conduct policy as renegotiated in 2020. One, the league proposes a punishment. Two, an independent disciplinary officer, a retired judge named Sue L. Robinson, takes over, ultimately makes a decision. Three, if she imposes any discipline at all, the commissioner has appeal jurisdiction. He can increase, he can decrease, he can do whatever he wants. His hands are only tied if she finds there should be no discipline whatsoever. Then the case ends and he can't do anything. But he still has final say. He still has no one hovering over his head once he makes a final decision. But that's the way that the process plays out. It's going to take time. And I would suspect that sooner than later we're going to find out, step one, what the league proposes so the disciplinary officer can activate her work and then the commissioner can do his work. And then we know by, the start of the regular season at the latest, ideally the start of training camp, whether he's going to be missing all or some of the season. Secondly, this is an important thing to remember too, because this PR battle between the lawyers, I think a lot of stuff gets lost in the cracks. This isn't just, did he do it? Did he do what he's accused of? Did he engage in sexual misconduct during one or more massage therapy sessions up to and including 22? He's been cleared criminally. That's one thing. He's got the 22 civil cases pending. Okay, fine. We'll see what happens with those, whether they get settled or go to trial. The separate question, and this is a critical question, did he violate the standards articulated in the personal conduct policy? Because it's not just, did you engage in sexual misconduct? There are some catch-all provisions at the bottom of the list of things that players aren't allowed to do that are broad enough to say you have brought discredit, you have undermined the integrity of the league. They can basically do whatever they want to do. And I think back to Ben Roethlisberger in 2010, never arrested, never charged. He was sued, but he only had 2 people who ever accused him of anything. He was suspended 6 games, reduced to 4. And when you look at the language of the letter that the commissioner sent to Roethlisberger in 2010, even though the circumstances are different, when you look at the language of that letter, you could very easily copy and paste it and apply it to Watson. So even if he's exonerated for everything he did, this idea that he was getting massages, and his lawyers admit that 3 of the 22 became consensual sexual activity. If you buy into the idea that he's got 40 different massage therapists he went to and that he apparently is going through the door thinking maybe this is going to take a turn, that could be enough for the league to say this is the kind of behavior that we need to step in, intervene, punish him, make sure that he learns his lesson and properly is rehabilitated going forward so he doesn't do it again. So even if he's ultimately exonerated on all counts, criminal and civil, the NFL could still say you violated the terms of our policy.
Mike, appreciate the time. As always, look for my call. We'll do it again whenever you're willing. Appreciate
Anytime,
it.
Rich.
I appreciate that. I truly do. That's Mike Florio at Pro Football Talk right here on the Rich Eisen Show. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.